Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. Among 100 beauties, I thought the crippled prince would never choose me, but he chose me outright. Synopsis: War erupts on the western Liang frontier. The prince of northern pacification, Shao Xing, is gravely wounded in the leg. To make amends, the emperor bestows 10,000 taels of gold upon him, along with 100 beauties. I am one of them. The emperor also declares that whoever serves him well shall be rewarded generously. Before me, 65 sisters have passed through, some left weeping, others walked out pale as corpses, all of them whispering that the prince of northern pacification is fierce and frightening. He sat on a wheelchair, expression like a demon, eyes cold as frost. Then it was my turn. My legs turned to jelly. I forced myself forward and stepped inside. I had barely dropped to my knees in greeting when a low, deep male voice rolled down from above, like thunder from the earth's core. Not bad at serving. This one will do. End of blurb. The selection, the Prince of Northern Pacification, Shao Xing, had left home to serve in the military at the age of 14. 10 years of campaigns. 100 battles, 100 victories. Half a year ago, in the Great Battle of Western Liang, an enemy scheme nearly cost him his life, yet he still returned triumphant. Both his legs were crippled. He had no choice but to come home to the capital to recuperate. His Majesty the Emperor personally bestowed upon him the title of Prince of Northern Pacification, rewarded him with 10,000 taels of gold, and granted him 100 beauties. To qualify, a woman had to be of clean background. Daughters of official households were preferred. Whether legitimate or born of concubines mattered less than appearance and temperament. The day I climbed into the carriage and headed for the capital, my mother clutched my 3 younger brothers and ran weeping alongside the road until she could run no more. My eyes, too, were swollen red from crying, red as peach pits. Sitting in front of the incense burner, I saw only my own face, hollow with dread. My father was a minor county magistrate in the southern district of Nan. He had pulled strings to get me included among the 100. He wanted to lean on the towering branch of royal power. But no one ever asked whether I was willing. I wept the entire long road to the capital and only stopped my tears when I stepped through the gates of the manor. The prince's household steward arranged lodgings for us in a separate courtyard and specially invited a palace etiquette mistress to instruct us in proper manners. At least we had one another to talk to and console, though life was hard. It was not so lonely. We only missed home often. Half a month later, early in the morning, the etiquette mistress woke us and had us dress carefully and apply light makeup. Led by the steward, we were ushered in groups into the main hall of the manor. The steward called names from a roster one by one. Whoever was called would enter the great hall alone. Only after the prince himself looked them over would it be decided whether they were to stay or not. Among the first dozens of young women who went in, all of them beautiful, each walked in smiling and came out in tears. A few I knew, wiping their eyes, said, "The prince is terrifying. Even sitting in that wheelchair he still frightens a person to death." At those words my heart trembled like a willow branch in a winter gale. Every one of those women was exquisite, many accomplished in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, in singing and dancing. And still they failed to catch his eye. Women of extraordinary beauty and talent, yet the prince would not spare them a glance. I thought, I might as well collect my 2 taels of silver, go back to my hometown, and be done with it, when the steward called my name. a layer of cold sweat broke out down my back. The great hall was vast and empty as a tomb, cold on all sides, not unlike the underworld at midday. I clenched my teeth, forced my fear down, and stepped over the threshold. But my legs were shaking too badly. With a thud, I pitched forward and fell flat on the floor. A sharp pain struck both kneecaps. I bared my teeth and stared, eyes wide. All 15 days of etiquette drills vanished like smoke in an instant. The only sound in the hall was my sharp, thin intake of breath. I thought, it's over. I'm finished. Kneeling wrong at the wrong moment, manners in total disarray, the prince would surely charge me with improper conduct and drag me out to be executed on the spot. I pressed my forehead to the floor. Just like a condemned prisoner awaiting judgment on her life, at last the verdict came, Not bad at serving. This one will do. Wait, did I hear that right? I just fell on my face and I've already been chosen. I could not help lifting my head to see what was actually wrong with this legendary prince of northern pacification. The moment I looked up, my gaze collided with a pair of deep, dark pupils, bottomless as an abyss, impossible to read. I startled, quickly bowed my head again, my heart a tangled mess, and kowtowed in trembling gratitude. I lifted my skirts, limped out of the great hall on unsteady legs. My close sisters rushed to surround me at once. Ah, Fu, you were truly chosen. Heavens! Why does your face look like that? Is the prince really as terrifying as they say? I recalled that single glance I had stolen, the man draped in a long black robe, seated on his wheelchair, his face cold as midwinter ice and snow. He truly did inspire dread. Before I could say anything, the etiquette mistress stepped up and said, "Prepare to pack your belongings and move into the private courtyard." Only then did the others understand that I had been selected, and they all looked at me with undisguised envy. "You truly have fortune on your side, young miss. From now on you'll be serving at the prince's side. If you serve him well, riches without end await you. Perhaps you'll even be made a princess consort." I knew these were only kind words to make things easier to bear. I quietly unclasped the silver bracelet at my wrist and gave it to her, my thanks for the days of guidance and care. Yet once chosen, there was no longer any chance of leaving the manor, no going home, no ever seeing my mother or brothers again. My heart sank. The tip of my nose stung, the rims of my eyes went red, but matters had come to this point, and grief would serve no purpose. The prince's legs were injured. Even without the etiquette mistress instructing me, I was determined to care for him with all my heart. Only that way could I hope for some measure of peace within this imposing household. As for becoming princess consort, a girl of humble origins like me did not even dare to dream of it. That day, besides me, the prince retained one other young woman. The two of us served together before him. But she kept shooting me sideways glances, eyes sharp enough to slice through a person, as if I had somehow wronged her. Honestly, I could not figure out how. To speak plainly, I was the one pouring tea, fetching water, kneading shoulders, and thumping backs. She needed only to stand to one side, smile prettily, call out, "Your Highness," once, and receive the same reward of silver as me. What on earth did she have to be dissatisfied about? If it weren't for the sake of appearances, would have glared right back at her. The bathing room. Today was the prince's regular day for a medicinal soak, as usual. I stood waiting outside. Then, unexpectedly, a voice called from within the room, "Come here. Scrub this prince's back, Yes, I answered hastily. By the time I registered what the words actually meant, my face had already turned red as a steamed bun. Everyone in the world knew the Prince of Northern Pacification was breathtakingly handsome. People called him the jade-faced King of Hell, a face of jade, a temper like the Lord of the Underworld. Even the etiquette mistress had said that to serve the prince was a blessing from 3 lifetimes of good fortune. But in all my years, apart from helping my mother bathe my 3 little brothers, I had never so much as touched a grown man's hand. And now I was being told to go in and scrub the prince's back. It was no different from being told to leap straight into the fire. I lingered and stalled, one foot advancing and one retreating, not daring to go forward. The person inside had already lost patience. Still not coming? Does this prince have to personally invite you in? The prince's voice was low and husky, like the faint vibration of an old string instrument in the middle of the night. Even in fear, one could not help finding it pleasant. But I was in no mood to appreciate it. My ears burned hot, my heart felt like it was being roasted alive. I crept around the folding screen on tiptoe, pinched the corner of the bathing cloth, and stood still. The scent of medicinal herbs drifted soft and gentle through the air, and there was only the quiet sound of water. I did not dare look anywhere I should not. Eyes on my nose, nose toward my heart, I kept my gaze absolutely fixed. The prince's legs were wounded. I was his attendant. Caring for him was my duty. I should not allow a single stray thought, but when my fingertips touched the firm, solid expanse of his back, my heart began to pound wildly. I scrubbed and inwardly chanted a kind of mantra. It's fine, it's fine. My 3 little brothers at home were all bathed by me. Their men too, no difference at all. Little brother's tummy was soft and squishy. The prince's tummy is, well, hard as a board. Little brother had a tiny, and there my hand froze. The prince's was, the moment I realized I had accidentally touched something I absolutely should not have, I yanked my hand back as if burned and nearly flung the bathing cloth across the room. But it was already too late. From behind me came a sharp, heavy intake of breath. Then a hard, solid hand closed around the back of my neck, bold. The prince's voice, low and grating, laced with fury. Who taught you to do that? Are you deliberately trying to humiliate this prince? Even if you gave me 10 extra livers, I would never dare do such a thing on purpose. Your Highness, please spare my life. Ah Fu had absolutely no intention. I would never be so presumptuous. I spoke and burst into tears. The tears fell like summer rain. I was genuinely terrified, shaking all over. His grip on my neck was so tight that one twist, and my neck would surely snap on the spot. A single teardrop fell onto the back of the prince's hand. He stilled, then abruptly released me. What are you crying for? This prince hasn't even done anything to you yet. I quickly wiped my face and bowed my head, pleading in a trembling voice over and over for forgiveness. In the end, I suppose he grew tired of being pestered. The prince waved a hand. Wait outside. Knowing I had narrowly escaped catastrophe, I scrambled to my feet, stumbled over my own hands and feet, and fled out the door. But just as I reached the entrance, a cold gust of wind swept through, icy enough to clear my head. I had left the prince alone in the bathing room. His legs were not convenient, and the stone floor was wet. If he slipped and fell, what then? At the thought, my heart hammered. If something really happened, 10 lives wouldn't be enough for me to keep. I steeled myself, summoned every last scrap of courage, pushed open the door and plunged back inside, filling my lungs and calling out in a rush, "Your Highness, would it perhaps be better to let Ah Fu help you change your robes?" The prince's was, the moment I realized I had accidentally touched something I absolutely should not have. I yanked my hand back as if burned and nearly flung the bathing cloth across the room. But it was already too late. From behind me came a sharp, heavy intake of breath. Then a hard, solid hand closed around the back of my neck, bold. The prince's voice, low and grating, laced with fury. "Who taught you to do that? Are you deliberately trying to humiliate this prince? Even if you gave me 10 extra livers, I would never dare do such a thing on purpose. Your Highness, please spare my life." Ah Fu had absolutely no intention. I would never be so presumptuous. I spoke and burst into tears. The tears fell like summer rain. I was genuinely terrified, shaking all over. His grip on my neck was so tight that one twist, and my neck would surely snap on the spot. A single teardrop fell onto the back of the prince's hand. He stilled, then abruptly released me. "What are you crying for? This prince hasn't even done anything to you yet." I quickly wiped my face and bowed my head, pleading in a trembling voice over and over for forgiveness. In the end, I suppose he grew tired of being pestered. The prince waved a hand. "Wait outside." Knowing I had narrowly escaped catastrophe, I scrambled to my feet, stumbled over my own hands and feet, and fled out the door. But just as I reached the entrance, a cold gust of wind swept through, icy enough to clear my head. I had left the prince alone in the bathing room. His legs were not convenient, and the stone floor was wet. If he slipped and fell, what then? At the thought, my heart hammered. If something really happened, 10 lives wouldn't be enough for me to keep. I steeled myself, summoned every last scrap of courage, pushed open the door and plunged back inside, filling my lungs and calling out in a rush, "Your Highness, would it perhaps be better to let Ah Fu help you change your robes?" And the prince had devoted himself entirely to his country, campaigning in distant lands while still barely grown, spending the rest of his days bound to a wheelchair. Now here, in his own manner, he still had to conceal and guard against discovery when he wished to be near the person he loved. I pitied him, having inadvertently stumbled into the prince's private affairs, the garden quarrel. That night I could not sleep a wink. By the time I woke, I could already hear crying outside the door. I rushed out. Xiao Dao lay face down on the ground, hair in tangles, both hands pressed over her face, weeping hard. Standing beside her was Lu Ruyuan, along with 2 of her own maidservants. Lu Ruyuan curled her lip in contempt. "Out so early in the morning, looking like a complete mess. You truly have no sense of decorum." I said nothing, just ran over to help Xiao Dao up. "Are you hurt anywhere?" Xiao Dao's face was flushed with fury. She pointed toward the small vegetable garden behind the kitchen. "My lady, they pulled out every single vegetable we planted, and struck Xiao Dao besides. That patch of land had been empty when I arrived. I thought it was a shame to leave it to waste, so Xiao Dao and I had cleared a small corner together and planted some greens. Just days ago, the seedlings had sprouted, pale and tender, a lovely bright green. Now every one of them had been yanked out and tossed into a corner. I could have tolerated that. But when I saw the 2 scratches on Xiao Dao's cheek, red and weeping, the anger inside me blazed up like dry hay caught by wind. I stepped in front of her and stared Lu Ruyuan straight in the eye. "What gives you the right to hit someone?" Apologized to her immediately, before today, Lu Ruyuan had always looked down on me. She made things difficult for me at every turn. I had bitten my tongue and endured it. My mother had always taught me that outside one's home, one must keep harmony. To tolerate is to invite blessings. But Lu Ruyuan had gone too far this time. She gave a light, contemptuous smile. It's only a maidservant. I hit her, so what? You want me to apologize? Dream on. I said nothing more. In one stride I lunged forward and slapped her across the face with everything I had. The crack of the blow rang out sharp and clear. Her head snapped sideways. Lu Ruyuan stared at me, her eyes wide, her face a picture of disbelief. You dare strike me? I gave a cold, contemptuous sound. Yes, I struck you. We are all attendants serving the prince. What gives you the right to lord it over everyone? Who do you think you are? No matter how beautiful you are, the prince has never once looked at you. Every word I said was the truth, because the prince had long since given his heart to another. Lu Ruyuan did not know. But I did, stung where it hurt most. She screamed and launched herself at me like a wild cat. Jiang Fu, I'll fight you to the death. Who's afraid of whom? I held her gaze without blinking. My mother had taught me to forgive, but she had also said that for someone who doesn't know their place, you simply scratch their face open. We tore into each other. The brawl between Lu Ruyuan and me eventually reached the prince's ears. In the flower pavilion, Lu Ruyuan wept loud and hard, her hair undone, her hairpin tilted sideways, a sizable patch of her silk skirt torn away, and a clear purple bruise visible on her face. To look at her, you'd think she'd been beaten half to death. Your Highness, you must take justice for Ruyuan. She sobbed, tears falling freely. This servant only wished to visit Sister Jiang Fu's courtyard and sit for a short while. I accidentally damaged a few vegetable sprouts, and she struck me until I looked like this. She dissolved into fresh sobs. The prince's expression was icy. He sat in cold silence, as though a storm was about to break. I shuddered and quickly stepped forward to explain. She is lying. She destroyed my entire vegetable garden and then laid hands on my maidservant. I was furious, which is why I struck her. The prince raised his eyes slightly, glanced at Lu Ruyuan, then shifted his gaze to me. His voice was cold as ice water. So you simply went ahead and beat her into this state. The moment he finished speaking, Lu Ruyuan's weeping grew louder and louder. Boo-hoo. Jiang Fu, you are a wicked fiend. You strike people and still show no remorse. Jiang Fu, apologized to her. I bit down hard on my lip, bowed my head but did not open my mouth. My eyes fixed steadily on the prince, silently cursing him in my heart. Shao Xing, you miserable wretch. You biased fool. Just because she's beautiful, you take her side completely. I did not see the scratches all over my own body. Humph, knowing how to cry is so impressive, is it? I refuse to apologize. If my mother were here, she would surely praise me. Well done, girl, you are not a daughter of the Jiang family for nothing. Thinking of my mother, the tip of my nose stung, my eyes instantly went red, tears threatening to spill. I quickly lifted my sleeve and wiped them away before anyone could notice. Lu Ruyuan's sniffling continued, steady as a needle pricking my ear. Shao Xing frowned, his expression one of someone about to fall ill with annoyance. He waved at the steward. Enough. Help her up. Have the physician come, tend to her carefully, make sure it heals without scars. In my heart I sneered, how affectionate. Even worried she might scar. Xiao Xing flicked a hand at me. Jiang Fu. Stay and kneel here to reflect on your conduct, kneel? As if. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and looked back at him without a trace of submission. Lu Ruyuan shot me a smug sideways glance as she departed, her satisfaction too extreme to conceal. But I knew perfectly well I was the one who had been attacked first. Day after day she made things difficult for me in front of Xiao Xing, and I did not believe for a moment that he hadn't noticed. He simply chose to look the other way, so I knelt there. The tiles of the flower pavilion were cold and unyielding as stone slabs, and before long my kneecaps ached until they went numb. Yet Xiao Xing still had not left. He seemed to want to remain and supervise me. Humph. I had never expected a single fair word from him, so I simply resolved to pay him no further attention. After a while, the man in black, Wu Feng, appeared again, silent as a breeze, slipping into the hall. He bent close to Xiao Xing's ear and murmured something low. I watched and inwardly gave a cold laugh. Did he not consider me a person worth hiding things from? Could he not step away from me for a moment? Xiao Xing seemed to sense my gaze. His eyes shifted, and met mine staring directly back at him, cold and unyielding. He narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping. Jiang Fu. What kind of look is that? I lowered my gaze to the frozen floor. Your Highness has misunderstood. Ah Fu was not looking at you. My tone carried a trace of unswallowed resentment. Wu Feng spoke up unexpectedly, his voice easy and warm. Your Highness, Miss Jiang is easily frightened. Do not alarm her. I startled slightly. I had not expected him to speak on my behalf. In this manner, besides Xiao Dao, no one had ever treated me with any real kindness. That single gentle word warmed something in my chest, like a small flame lit in the dead of winter. Xiao Xing cleared his throat. His expression went even colder. Since when was it your place to teach this prince how to conduct himself? He turned to me, his gaze sharp as an east wind cutting across frozen ground. Jiang Fu, are you still not standing up? Do you want this prince to personally help you to your feet? Stand if I must. I was sore anyway. I pressed down with my feet and tried to rise. But I had been kneeling too long. The moment I put weight on my knees, both legs had gone completely numb, and my whole body lurched forward, straight into a firm, warm embrace. Miss Jiang, careful, a voice above my head, quiet, low, and gentle. My face flushed red in an instant. Thank you, Wu Feng. He steadied me until I stood on my own, then gently let go and stepped back to stand behind the prince. I had barely looked up when I found Xiao Xing staring fixedly at me. His gaze was no longer indifferent as before. It held a trace of unnamed anger. This prince didn't realize the two of you had grown so close. Was Xiao Xing being unreasonable? I had spoken with Wu Feng only a handful of times, and yet the prince suspected us of being intimately involved. The injustice of 3 lifetimes couldn't be greater. Wu Feng, sensing the tension, found a pretext and slipped away. I wanted to leave too, but my legs still hadn't recovered. I couldn't lift them. Xiao Xing noticed me standing alone in the middle of the great hall, looking bleak, not speaking. He let out a slow sigh. Come here. Let this prince see where you're injured. I quickly pulled my collar high, hiding the scratches on my neck and behind my ear, all left by Lu Ryuan's nails. I did not want him to see. Your Highness need not pity Ah Fu. Go and look in on Lu Ryuan instead. I hear her injuries are worse. The words were full of pout. To my surprise, they put Xiao Xing in a better mood. He gave a slight laugh. Oh. You know how to sulk now? He paused. She was sent by the Emperor. Right now it's inconvenient to deal with her, but this prince won't let her strut under his nose for long. I froze. So Lu Ryuan had that kind of background. No wonder she'd always look down her nose at everyone. Wait, I had just struck one of the Emperor's people. If she reported me to the court, not only would I be beheaded, she could drag my entire family down with me. What was I to do? Would she go to the Emperor and accuse me? Should I go and apologize now? Was it still not too late? Seeing me go pale with terror, Xiao Xing lowered his voice and said gently, "Don't be afraid. This matter won't leave the manor. By the time her wounds heal, so-called evidence will have vanished on its own." I immediately recalled, earlier, he had carefully instructed the steward to summon a skilled physician and make sure no scars remained. At the time I'd thought he was simply favoring her. Now I realized he'd had his own plan all along. My heart, which had been clutching the edge of a cliff, finally eased, and I let out a long, slow breath. Xiao Xing wheeled closer. Done sulking? I peeked up, and my gaze collided with those dark, deep eyes, black as the sea at night. Sharp nose, clear-cut features as if carved. The corner of his mouth curved slightly, his expression holding a lazy ease that was somehow impossible to read. A devastatingly beautiful face. I muttered quietly, Ah Fu would never dare be angry. He gave a faint laugh, then gently commanded, "Then sit down and let this prince see where you've been hurt." If Xiao Xing were an ordinary man, he would have set 10,000 young women's hearts aflame, willing to follow him to the ends of the earth. A face of jade, a bearing of mist, cold and imposing, even seated on a wheelchair he made others afraid to look too directly. What a pity for Wu Feng's sake. That day, the prince himself applied medicine to my wounds. He carefully instructed me that for the next few days, the wounds should not get wet. He also sent people to bring an entire cartload of rare seedlings and flower seeds, and said, "Stay peacefully in your small courtyard, tend your garden and let your injuries heal. No need to come and attend on me." But to the outside world, it was announced that I was being confined for offending someone. I was quietly moved, and Xiao Dao and I kept ourselves busy for several days. I began to think, in secret, about preparing a surprise gift for the prince, for that winter. The winter solstice happened to fall on his birthday, the birthday banquet. On the morning of his birthday, guests arrived in a constant stream to offer congratulations. Even the emperor dispatched his most trusted eunuch to personally deliver gifts. The entire manor was lively from dawn onward. For the evening banquet, I carried a bowl of longevity noodles I had just finished making and walked over to the prince's table. Beside Xiao Xing, Lu Ryuan was seated close, her dress gorgeous, face powdered and lips rouged, a faint fragrance drifting from her like a flower blooming in the night air. Wu Feng stood behind the prince, composed as always. I bowed my head and could not quite suppress a quiet laugh. All that elaborate adornment was like painting flowers on a foggy mirror. However beautiful she was, she could not move a heart that already belonged elsewhere. And who the prince kept by his side, I understood better than anyone. I stepped forward with a smile and presented the bowl. Your Highness, may peace and health be yours. A bowl of longevity noodles. May you live 100 years. Please eat while it is still hot. Wu Feng inhaled appreciatively. That smells wonderful. Miss Jiang knows her way around a kitchen too. I smiled modestly. Only passable, it will fill an empty stomach. Nothing more. Right then Lu Ruyuan gave a cold little laugh. A half-hearted effort like this dares to be offered to the prince? Jiang Fu, you truly have no sense of proper conduct. I drew a slow, deep breath. Kept calm. Remembered Shao Xing's words, don't lower yourself to argue with someone unworthy. So every cutting remark I'd been about to fling in Lu Ruyuan's face, I swallowed whole. Wu Feng spoke up, his voice gentle as an early morning breeze. His Highness and I have spent years garrisoning the frontier. Our food there was meant only to fill our stomachs. Noodles made with such care as these, it is clear Miss Jiang put her heart into it. I knew he was standing up for me, and warmth bloomed in my chest. If you want a good broth, the ingredients must be really fresh. I got up at the third watch of the night to make this. I slaughtered the chicken myself, boiled it on high heat first, then simmered it low and slow for more than 2 hours. The noodles I kneaded myself this morning. The strands are chewy and firm. There is still plenty left in the pot. If Wu Feng wants some, I will ladle out a bowl. No sooner had I finished speaking than Shao Xing gave a cool, unhurried sound. Not loud, not sharp, but unmistakably clear. Talking as though following this prince here has made you suffer such hardship. And to Wu Feng, not having any? Then be quiet. What is the point of eating longevity noodles? People watching might think today is your birthday. Shao Xing let the line fall, casual and cutting as a sharp blade. Lu Ruyuan seized the moment and inserted herself smoothly. Your Highness, don't be cross. It's only a bowl of noodles, not worth spoiling the good spirits of such an auspicious day. Shao Xing nodded. Fair enough. She turned and shot me a sideways glance, triumph barely contained, as if saying, you see? It is still me the prince trusts. Shao Xing had already picked up his chopsticks and lifted a mouthful of noodles. His gaze was distant and cool, his voice quiet. Not bad. Hearing that, I felt a small bloom of satisfaction I could not help. After all, I had gotten up at the third watch of the night to make it. Lu Ruyuan, unwilling to concede, immediately picked up a flask of wine and carried it before the prince with practiced elegance. Ruyuan wishes His Highness a birthday full of peace and good health. May you be blessed and long-lived. Wu Feng stepped forward and blocked her, his voice easy. Many thanks for Miss Lu's kind regard, but His Highness has never drunk wine. At banquets where a response is required, Wu Feng drinks on his behalf. He reached out to take the wine cup. But Lu Ruyuan immediately shifted her expression and said sternly, this is wine personally bestowed by the emperor. Do you dare drink it? Wu Feng stilled. He quietly withdrew his hand and stepped back one pace. The atmosphere around the table fell heavy and cold all at once. Shao Xing said nothing. He finished the last of his noodles, then slowly accepted the cup from her hand, tilted his head and drank it dry. My thanks. I stood to one side and silently tightened my hand at my side. Even the prince himself had to yield to Lu Ruyuan 3 steps worth of ground. What had happened today made one thing very clear to me. Lu Ruyuan was not someone to tangle with lightly. She was not someone a young woman with no backing, could openly oppose. Partway through the banquet, the prince suddenly called me to his side and said he was feeling unwell and wished me to will him back to his chambers to rest. I hurried over and bent to push the chair. Shao Xing closed his eyes in silence, seated on the wheelchair. Though seated, his tall frame still held the same commanding presence as ever. Tonight he wore a long robe of deep black, the fabric pooled around him like shadow, his bearing more noble and unapproachable than usual. I thought to myself, the prince truly is devastatingly beautiful. We passed through the flower garden. The noise of the banquet in the front courtyard slowly faded. I wheeled Shao Xing into his room and bent to wake him gently, to help him up to bed. But the moment I leaned in close, those eyes opened. He fixed his gaze on me. His eyes, usually deep as still water, now held a faint, raw red at their corners, a thin, glistening layer of moisture. His breath began to come in uneven, ragged waves. I had never seen the prince like this. Never, not once. I instinctively leaned back. My palms were damp with panic. He lifted his hand and caught my wrist. Don't be afraid. Go and fill a basin of cold water for this prince, then stay here, watch over me. His voice was low and suppressed, as if something had been held back until it was straining at its limit. I dared not delay. I turned and ran. The night of Hejuan powder. A short while later, I had filled the tub with water and rushed back. The moment I pushed open the door, I saw him still struggling to hold himself upright. I threw myself forward to support him, letting the upper half of his body lean on my shoulder. Careful, Your Highness, slowly. He was truly heavy. But it was not his physical weight that pressed down on my heart. It was this state of his, something I had never seen before. Shao Xing braced himself against the side of the tub. His brows were clenched tight. A flush was creeping up over his cheekbones, an abnormal, burning red. His breathing grew faster and faster, sweat beading at his temples, large drops rolling down like soybeans. I stood beside him, helpless and frantic, not knowing what to do. I turned to run for Wufeng, but before I could cross the threshold, a hoarse voice pulled me back. Where do you think you are going? Your Highness, let me find Wufeng. He will certainly know how to save you. Shao Xing gritted his teeth, his gaze dark and shadowed. What can he do? He stopped. Then, as though the words cost him something, he forced each one out. I have been given Hejuan powder. I froze. What was Hejuan powder? Shao Xing exhaled in labored bursts, his voice heavy and constrained. It is a secret court medicine. Used to stimulate the body during intimate congress. There is no antidote. My face blazed as if slapped. My heart pounded in disarray. My entire body began to tremble. I quickly tried to pull his hand off my wrist. Then all the more reason to find someone. Surely you cannot endure this alone? Please bear with it for a moment, Your Highness. Shao Xing's expression darkened. His eyes flickered with anger. Jiang Fu, this prince does not have the inclination of Long Yang. At a moment like this, what is the point of saying that? I know, you do not favor men. I understand. But please, let me go and fetch Wufeng. All right? The moment I turned, my neck was caught. A powerful hand curved around the back of my head and pulled me close. The distance between us shrunk 2 inches. His hot breath washed over my face. Those eyes, usually deep and calm as still water, were now blazing with a barely contained, desperate intensity. Jiang Fu, give this prince back his purity. Before I could make sense of what he meant, his mouth covered mine. Warm, certain, insistent. With one hand Xiao Xing gripped the back of my neck, his head tilting slightly, the kiss growing deeper and deeper. The shock of it overwhelmed me before I could react. The faint trace of wine wrapped around every breath, every beat of my heart. My mind went blank. I could only grip the front of his sodden inner robe in both fists. I could not say how much time passed. At last Xiao Xing drew back from my lips and rested his forehead gently against mine. His chest heaved violently. Those deep, lake-dark eyes swirled with waves he could no longer hide. I was thrown into panic, and instinctively tried to escape, but it was already too late. Xiao Xing pressed one hand against the edge of the tub and pushed himself upright. The world spun. A silk curtain fell, blocking out the lamplight. Once again, those burning lips covered mine. Drops of water fell from his hair, soaking through the embroidered coverlet beneath. In the dim shadow of the canopy, faint, soft sounds drifted out, the kind that would make anyone who chanced to hear them blush and turn away. The following morning I woke to find the space beside me already empty. I had no idea when the prince had left. I blinked, rolled over, and felt every muscle in my back aching, my limbs barely my own. My face burned. I forced myself to sit up, put my feet on the floor, and immediately my legs buckled. I nearly fell over backwards. The door creaked open without warning. Lu Riyuan glided in, graceful in trailing skirts, with the bearing of a plum blossom in snow. Your Highness, that soft, sweet voice choked to a stop the moment her eyes landed on mine. Jiang Fu. Why are you here? Her gaze drifted slowly past me to the bed behind. Blankets and pillows in disarray, the bed curtains hanging loose, not yet retied. A single second later, her expression twisted with pure rage. Jiang Fu, now I understand why His Highness slipped away in the middle of the farewell banquet last night. You vile, base creature. You dare ruin what was meant to be mine. Screaming, she lunged at me, snatching at my hair, those long nails raking across my face. The stinging pain tore a small cry from my throat. I remembered her status, a woman sent personally by the emperor, and I did not dare fight back. I could only curl up, covering my head with both arms. You shameless wretch. Without a sound, you seduced the prince, and you still can't look at your own reflection. You're nothing but a worthless slave. She clawed and screamed and tore at my clothes, dragging out every trace of the night before into the harsh light. When she saw the red-purple marks scattered across my neck and shoulders, something in her eyes went feral. Past reason entirely, she ripped a hairpin from her head, raised it high, and aimed it straight at me. From outside the door came a furious shout. Stop! Lu Riyuan finally froze. I lowered my arms from my head, pushed through the pain, and slowly raised my eyes. Wu Feng was pushing Xiao Xing rapidly through the door, the expressions on both their faces dark enough to be frightening. Xiao Xing's gaze was ice-cold, a winter chill that seemed to reach inside the chest and freeze the heart still. I looked at him and gave a thin, faint, proud smile. Your Highness, you see, Ah Fu remembered your words. Not a single move to resist. My voice was soft, but each word landed like a weight. Blood still trickled from the scratches on my cheek and forehead. My hair was in chaos, my dress disheveled, and yet I had not bowed my head. The moment Lu Ryuan saw the prince, her expression flipped completely. She threw herself at him, dissolving into tears. Your Highness, Jiang Fu overstepped all propriety. She dared to climb into your bed. A resounding slap cut her short. Shao Xing raised his hand and struck her across the face without the slightest mercy. The force of it sent her sprawling to the floor. The corner of her mouth burst open and bled. She stared up at him, too stunned even to make a sound, lips moving as if to speak, but Shao Xing didn't even look at her. He turned to Wu Feng, voice cold, take her and confine her to Lingxiang courtyard. Strip her of all maidservants and attendants. From today onward she does not leave a single step without my order. Anyone who dares release her, beheaded. Wu Feng asked no questions, just walked over and dragged Lu Ryuan, screaming and thrashing, out the door like a sack of hay. Only the two of us remained in the room. I steadied my shaking hands and tried to straighten my clothes, then stood up through the pain. Your Highness, the moment I opened my mouth, my tears fell. Why did I feel so wronged? When she pulled my hair halfway off my scalp, I didn't cry. And yet now, with one glance at the prince, I could not stop the tears, truly beyond help. I turned my back, clumsily wiped my face with my sleeve, then two warm hands settled gently on my shoulders. Shao Xing drew me slowly into his arms. His voice was slightly unsteady. Why didn't you fight back? He seemed to have already guessed the reason, and pulled me tighter against his chest. It's all right. I am here. I pressed my face into his chest and breathed in deeply. The familiar scent of sandalwood from his robes made something in my throat tighten. And then my tears broke through completely. Wah! I had never lost to anyone from the time I was small. I was always the one helping my mother with heavy work. My strength was not weak, even my 3 brothers at home couldn't beat me in a fight. But I burrowed into his arms and sobbed like a child, wrapping both arms around his waist. Shao Xing gently patted my back, his voice low as spring wind. I know. Ah Fu is the bravest. My Ah Fu has been so terribly wronged. By the time I had finished crying, his front robe was soaked in a large patch. I blinked and looked up, and suddenly felt embarrassed. Shao Xing tilted my chin. His eyes were full of heartache. I'm sorry. I came too late. I sniffled and shook my head. I don't blame your Highness at all. Although the emperor had shown mercy and did not require Shao Xing to attend court regularly, the prince still woke every day at the 4th watch, rain or shine, and never once slackened in his duties of governance. If there was anyone to blame, it was this all-too-powerful authority that had made it easy for people to be crushed underfoot. Shao Xing said nothing more. He reached out and lifted me onto his lap, then gently turned back my sleeve. His fingers touched the swollen skin lightly. From now on, I will not let you be wronged again. Be good, let me apply the medicine. His voice was very soft, but every word fell into my ear, heavier than the spring wind, warmer than the full moon. Before I could react, he had already gently slipped off my outer garment, his movements careful and unhurried. His cool fingers met burning, tender skin, every scratch on my shoulder, my neck, my back had risen red and angry, some of them barely suppressing blood. Shao Xing looked at it, his face darkening, his hands trembling faintly. He said nothing, only clenched his jaw, opened the medicine jar, and applied it in silence, drop by careful drop. His touch was feather-light, as though the slightest pressure might cause me more pain. I lowered my eyes, not daring to look at him. I could feel the rims of my eyes heating up again. From the time I was small, living in a village, I had done every kind of heavy work, taken bumps and cuts of every kind, and never gone soft. But today, simply because someone was tending to my wounds with such gentleness, I wanted to cry all over again. He finished applying the medicine, wiped his hands on a silk cloth, helped me straighten my clothes and tie the sash. Then he sat quietly for a moment and reached out to stroke the top of my head. "Stay here tonight. You don't need to go back to your courtyard." I was still uneasy. "Your Highness has confined Lu Ruyuan to Lingxiang courtyard. She was sent by the Emperor himself. If you lock her up like this, what will you say to him when he asks?" His hand stilled in the middle of applying the medicine. His eyes went dark and cold, cold enough to make the heart tremble. "If she dares to put medicine in this prince's wine, she had best have made peace with her fate." His voice was very quiet, but it sounded like a blade leaving its sheath. Then he spoke, slowly, as one recounting something long past. "The injury in my legs was not, in truth, beyond healing. It is only that when power grows too great, the outcome is never good. My father was the same way, once." I startled. So the person Shao Xing had always kept hidden in his heart was his predecessor, the general who had been his father. A war god of his era. He died without dying whole, suspected by the emperor, destroyed. The emperor needs me, but he also fears me. Better to step back early than to wait to be eliminated. Now all the world knows the Prince of Northern Pacification is a cripple who can never return to the battlefield. He is no longer a threat. In exchange, a road to life. I was both startled and quietly grateful. At least there was still a road to live on. "Does your Highness mean that your legs could be healed?" Too overcome, I shifted sharply without thinking. Shao Xing gave a faint sound, and his arm tightened around me, pulling me closer. "Yes. But the time is not yet right." I looked up at him, remembering when he had once said he would deal with Lu Ruyuan when the time came. And now, so soon, the time had come. Did that mean his legs would heal before long too? Shao Xing reached out and lightly pinched my cheek, the corner of his mouth curving. "Just that, and you're already so happy?" I nodded vigorously, without hesitation. "Of course. Your Highness was made to ride on horseback in full armor, to ride the battlefield. To one day suddenly be unable to stand, you must feel far from at peace. Even hearing the story, Ah Fu feels it is such a shame for you." The moment I finished speaking, something shifted in the prince's eyes. The gaze that had always been cold and distant softened, like the surface of a quiet lake when a spring breeze passes through. The corner of his mouth turned up. His voice was low and warm as silk. "Ah Fu is truly a good girl." I looked into his eyes, and for a fleeting moment remembered the image of those same eyes. The night before, filled with urgency and longing. My heart knocked wildly. My face went hot. Ah, the medicine is finished. Ah Fu will take her leave first. Just as I moved to slide off his lap, a steady arm reached around my waist and pulled me back. "Stay and keep this prince company a while." He said it, then tilted my chin up and pressed a soft kiss to my lips, the truth about Lu Ryuan. A few days later, Xiao Dao crept close and whispered to me as if telling a great secret. Apparently Lu Ryuan was caught with one of the groomsmen, in full daylight, right there in the courtyard, brazenly carrying on. I stared at her, speechless. That can't be. How could she possibly have an eye for a stable hand? Xiao Dao pursed her lips in contempt. Humph. All that posturing is some refined, upright lady. Turns out she simply couldn't bear the loneliness. Doing shameless things like that inside the manor itself. If I were the prince, I would have long since sent her a cup of poison. She's made a real mess of the prince's honor. I found it hard to believe too, but when I thought of all her vicious, unbridled behavior before, I found I wasn't entirely surprised. That evening, when I was helping the prince change his outer robe for the night, I finally couldn't hold it in any longer. I hear Lu Ryuan has committed an act of the gravest impropriety. Xiao Xing suddenly took my hand in a gentle squeeze, lifted it and pressed a kiss to the back of my hand. His voice was soft. Such filth, don't let it reach Ah Fu's ears. It would only dirty them. My face turned red. I quickly cleared my throat to cover my confusion. If this matter gets out, will it cause you difficulty? I was hinting, gently, that if he didn't want gossip to spread, it might be worth informing the household staff so no one let anything slip. To my surprise, Xiao Xing gave a cool, thin smile. The more it spreads, the better. Let a certain person hear it, and stop sending more people to this prince. I was taken aback. I hadn't thought he would want that scandalous tale to get out. After all, he was a prince. A man of 3 wives and 4 concubines was completely standard in others' eyes. Even if the emperor stopped giving people, high-ranking officials would still send their daughters to his door, hoping to trade a daughter for a piece of glory. Just as my own father, a tiny county magistrate, had poured out all the household savings to send me here, betting on fortune with my life. While I was still lost in thought, he raised my chin with a finger, his voice carrying a hint of lazy amusement and something sharper beneath. Still distracted. Is there any room for me at all in those eyes of yours? My face blazed. I didn't dare look at him directly. I fixed my gaze on the wall lantern, its golden light flickering softly in the dark. From that night onward, I stayed in his study every night. I had imagined that with his condition, matters of the inner chamber would be infrequent. Little did I know that what appeared cold and glacial to the outside world was, behind closed doors, a fire that burned without restraint. Many times I thought I could not bear it. Only now had I barely managed to adapt. At this very moment, his broad palm rested on my back, slowly tracing along my side. My entire body went rigid. I tried to suppress my trembling and whispered a plea. Your Highness, why not take a few concubines to share the load? The moment the words left my mouth, his hands stopped dead. The next thing I knew, his expression went cold as ice. Jiang Fu, you want this prince to take concubines? I genuinely could not understand why that would make him angry, so I spoke carefully. Everyone does it. Even a poor scholar wants a concubine to attend to him. Your Highness is talented and powerful. Those willing to marry you would be too many to count. Taking a few more consorts is perfectly natural, isn't it? Before I finished speaking, the arm around me tightened sharply. My whole body was pulled against that hard chest, painfully. Before I could ask what was happening, I heard him say each word with cold precision, his voice low and grave, Jiang Fu. In this lifetime, I will take only one wife. Even if you cannot bear it, you will have to learn to accept it." He didn't finish the sentence. A fierce, furious kiss pressed down and stole my breath. Unlike the tender times before, this kiss was both arrogant and wild. In the flickering pink candlelight, the curtains billowed low and long, the silhouettes of two people entwined together, the silk screen shivering without cease, until the fifth watch of the morning, when the roosters crowed, before it finally went still. A letter from home, in a single battle, winter bites cold. In the blink of an eye, it was nearly the end of the year. A letter arrived from home, delivered by a messenger. When I opened it, my hands were already trembling and could not grow still. The surge of emotion in my chest was already overflowing. Tears blurred my vision. I had to rub my eyes again and again before I could make out the words. Two thin sheets of paper, only a few short lines belonged to my mother. The rest was all from my father. Full of instructions: serve the prince loyally, do your best to conceive a child so you can stand firm in the household with a legitimate claim. Remember not to forget your 3 brothers at home. Think of helping advance their futures. I pressed my face to the tabletop and began to cry aloud. Half a year since entering the capital, every reward I had received from the manor, I had quietly sent home, hoping to make my mother's life a little easier. But only now did I understand. I had been naive. As long as that father of mine was there, even if gold and silver piled up to the ceiling, my mother would never have a single day of peace. Xiao Dao stood to one side, at a loss, not knowing what to do. Since the day I entered the manor, she had never once seen me cry. I had always treated Xiao Dao like a younger sister, always smiling, always soft-spoken. Whether I was favored or in disgrace, I never let it weigh on me, as though all my heart, from beginning to end, belonged only to the little vegetable patch behind the kitchen and to the letters I sent home. Xiao Dao panicked, her eyes going red. "My lady, what is wrong? If there's something hurting you, tell Xiao Dao. If you're angry, you can hit Xiao Dao a few times to let it out. Just please don't cry." I looked up with reddened eyes and pulled her close. I knew very clearly that, however well the prince cherished me now, a man's affection has an expiration date. I dared not form a real attachment. Even when we lay together through those long nights, and he murmured tender words beside my ear, I dared not answer them in kind. Because I knew, even these tears I was crying now were only to remind myself, Jiang Fu, don't fall in love with him so easily. My mother had nearly gone blind from weeping, used herself up helping my father obtain a small official post. Bore him 3 sons, worn her body to the bone, in exchange for a scrap of devotion. And what was the result? When her father looked at her, old and faded, he began looking elsewhere for young and beautiful women. When he heard the emperor was selecting beauties to bestow on the prince, he didn't hesitate to wring the household dry and send me to the capital, gambling my entire life on his own future prosperity. Is a woman's whole life truly only to be lived by clinging to a man? I thought as I wept, and finally cried myself to sleep out of sheer exhaustion. When I woke in the slant of the afternoon sun, I found someone sitting beside my bed, the prince. His expression was unusually grave. The moment he saw me open my eyes, he quickly leaned forward and asked, "How are you feeling? Still tired?" I could not understand why his gaze was so urgent. But seeing someone who genuinely cared about me, my heart softened involuntarily. "Your Highness, why have you come?" He gave no answer, only smiled faintly. The corners of his eyes and his brows held a joy he could not conceal. Naturally, I came to see you. He took my hand. His fingers interlaced with mine, one by one. My lady, what is wrong? If there's something hurting you, tell Xiao Dao. If you're angry, you can hit Xiao Dao a few times to let it out. Just please don't cry. I looked up with reddened eyes and pulled her close. I knew very clearly that, however well the prince cherished me now, a man's affection has an expiration date. I dared not form a real attachment. Even when we lay together through those long nights, and he murmured tender words beside my ear, I dared not answer them in kind. Because I knew, even these tears I was crying now were only to remind myself, Jiang Fu, don't fall in love with him so easily. My mother had nearly gone blind from weeping, used herself up helping my father obtain a small official post. Bore him 3 sons, worn her body to the bone, in exchange for a scrap of devotion. And what was the result? When her father looked at her, old and faded, he began looking elsewhere for young and beautiful women. When he heard the emperor was selecting beauties to bestow on the prince, he didn't hesitate to wring the household dry and send me to the capital, gambling my entire life on his own future prosperity. Is a woman's whole life truly only to be lived by clinging to a man? I thought as I wept, and finally cried myself to sleep out of sheer exhaustion. When I woke in the slant of the afternoon sun, I found someone sitting beside my bed, the prince. His expression was unusually grave. The moment he saw me open my eyes, he quickly leaned forward and asked, "How are you feeling? Still tired?" I could not understand why his gaze was so urgent. But seeing someone who genuinely cared about me, my heart softened involuntarily. "Your Highness, why have you come?" He gave no answer, only smiled faintly. The corners of his eyes and his brows held a joy he could not conceal. "Naturally, I came to see you." He took my hand. His fingers interlaced with mine, one by one. His voice fell, soft but weighted with something like a solemn promise. "Ah Fu, I want to marry you as my principal wife." I thought the prince must have been so startled by emotion that his mind had gone. Proposing to me, wanting to take me as his principal consort, his princess. I was just a woman of ordinary background. My looks could not be called world-overturning. If he married me it would mean making me the princess consort. I had never dared dream of such a thing. But I could not argue against his words, either. He was his own kind of fool, and I could only grip my own heart tightly and absolutely refuse to be moved. I had seen too many times the image of my mother's thin back in the middle of the night, wiping tears in silence. I did not want to live a life like that. From that day on, the prince no longer had me waiting on him morning and evening. Every day he actively came to find me, sometimes bringing a few curious, unusual toys, sometimes sitting under the eaves of the house and reading old books aloud to me. Every time he smiled, my eyes seemed to brighten a little too. Only recently, my body had been constantly tired, always wanting to sleep, my entire being dragged down by an unending drowsiness. Before, I could eat 2 bowls of rice at a single meal. Now, just catching a whiff of meat or fish was enough to make my stomach roil with nausea. Xiao Dao was worried at first, then she covered her mouth with a laugh. I looked at her suspiciously. "What are you laughing at?" Xiao Dao puffed out her cheeks, her eyes sparkling. "My lady, you have good news." "It's a baby." I was stunned for a long time before I could speak. When I looked back, I realized my monthly cycle had indeed not come for quite some time. My heart tumbled into an unclear, hovering space. I didn't know why, but the first image that rose in my mind was the prince. Then my mother. A child of the prince's bloodline. Something everyone in the manor craved, even the emperor beyond the palace walls. From the very beginning, all I had ever wanted from entering this manor was to live in peace. Favored for a day, live for a day. If one day the prince grew tired of me and I had already let myself fall in love with him, that would be a suffering worse than death. That day was the little New Year. Snow had just stopped falling. The prince returned earlier than usual. On a face long kept cold, a faint trace of a smile flickered across. I couldn't guess the reason. That evening, a few bites into dinner, the nausea came on again. I vomited until nothing but bile remained. The prince became frantic and immediately called for the physician. After examining me, the physician bowed and said, "Felicitations, Your Highness. The lady carries a joyous pulse. The nausea and fatigue are signs of early pregnancy. With proper rest and care, there is nothing to worry about." The gaze Xiao Xing turned on me was overwhelmed with emotion, joy, apprehension, and a disbelief that he could not quite allow himself to feel. I looked at him and gave a small smile. I once watched my mother endure this. When she was carrying the third little brother, she couldn't even drink cold water. She vomited until she couldn't breathe. I am not afraid of hardship or pain or childbirth. What I feared was that this thread of feeling would be nothing more than cloud and passing wind. But deep in my heart there was still a silent wish. I want to go home and see my mother one more time. I want to see her eyes, nearly blind from crying. I want to tell her with my own mouth, "Mother, your daughter is doing well." Yet seeing the prince's face these past days, worn thin by court duties, I did not dare open my mouth. I could only pretend to be tired and lie down to sleep. Night fell. In the room, only the faint yellow light of the candles remained. The prince sat beside me, lifted my hand and placed it gently against his cheek. His voice was thin as winter branches. "Ah, Fu, I know what you are thinking. After the new year passes, everything you hope for, I will arrange it all properly for you." New Year's Eve, at the end of the year, the entire manor was hung with red lanterns. Every corner blazed with color, the scent of red paper mingling with the fragrance of rice cakes, the atmosphere of reunion. Yet I could not be reunited with my family. That day the prince finished his morning court early. He draped a thick fox fur coat over my shoulders himself, pulling it up snug to my wrists. "Come, let me take you somewhere." Outside, thick snow clung to the ground in silence. The main road was quiet and empty of people. The only sounds the light rolling of the wheelchair and the faint beating of my heart in my chest. In the carriage, I lay lazily against the soft cushion, a brocade blanket pulled across my middle to cover the slight swell of my belly. The prince drew out a small white porcelain jar, removed the lid, and offered it to my lips. "Ah, Fu, taste this. Preserved plums soaked in honey, a new recipe from Baigu Tang Confectionery." I looked at him and smiled, then took the plum from his fingers with a gentle bite. Sweet bloomed on my tongue. He immediately asked, "How is it?" I nodded. "Delicious." He seemed to shed a burden, and offered another, his smile gentle. "Good. Ever since you became pregnant, your face grows thinner by the day. Eat what you can. Don't force yourself." At his words, something sank quietly in my chest. Since becoming pregnant, everything in the manor had been changed to nourishing dishes. Black bone chicken soup, ginseng congee, snow mushroom hot pot, angelica stew. Every one of them good for the baby, every one of them impossible for me to force down. But every time I thought about the baby, that this child was Xiao Xing's bloodline, a part of his heart, I gritted my teeth and swallowed spoonful by hard one spoonful. Because this child was not just mine. It was a part of him. Even if in every meal I could only manage 2 parts out of 10, at least something remained in my stomach. I knew clearly that the prince had never waited on anyone in his life. And yet here he was, carefully attentive to every small detail around me, as though afraid I would break if he moved too quickly. As if in his eyes, I was the most important person in the world. And still I dared not hope for too much. I simply tilted my head and quietly asked, "Where are we going?" The prince looked up, the corner of his mouth curved. A smile more gentle than any spring wind passing through the windows. "Taking you to meet someone very important. We'll be there soon. When we arrive, you'll know. If you're tired, just lean on my shoulder and sleep for a while." The carriage rocked along the road. I nestled against his warm chest, breathing in the faint scent of sandalwood from his robe. For the first time in my life, greed stirred in my heart. If only this pair of arms could belong to me and no one else, would that not mean this daughter of my mother had finally found someone who truly loved her? I closed my eyes with a self-mocking smile. How foolish, could such a thing ever be real? Before long the carriage stopped. Wu Feng helped the prince onto his wheelchair, then reached out to help me down. Before me stood a plain but tidy little house. The courtyard had already been swept clear of snow. Red lanterns hung above the door, swaying gently in the evening wind. I looked at the prince with uncertainty. "Your Highness, what is this place?" Xiao Xing smiled. Those eyes that had long been frost-touched by court affairs now held only warmth. "New Year's means reunion. A family of 3, no one missing." My heart tightened. I didn't dare let myself think further. Then the red door opened from within. The woman I had longed for in every corner of my heart stood beneath the eaves, reaching out and waving. "Ah, Fu, Mother is here. Mother is here." I barely managed a single choked cry of "Mother," before my whole body flew into her arms. Tears fell like spring rain, no longer possible to hold back. A round table had been set with a few familiar dishes. The smell was just like my mother's cooking from long ago. Every single one of them was childhood, was home, was those hungry, difficult days when at least we had each other. My 3 brothers sat stiffly to one side, too awed by the prince's presence to even dare look up. My mother was pouring tea and clumsily wiping her hands on her apron, bowing her head over and over, her face full of worry. "Your Highness, I am only a humble commoner. The cooking is plain and simple. If anything is improper, please don't hold it against us." I glanced over at Xiao Xing. He sat there, quiet and dignified in his wheelchair, yet his eyes were unusually warm. "We are already one family. No need for such formality." He said it, then let his gaze fall on me with tenderness. "Ah, Fu misses home when she is in the manor. Now that you are reunited, her heart will be at ease." From the moment I had seen my mother at the small gate, the corners of my eyes had not once dried. He had brought her here, and had quietly, without my knowing, arranged for my father to be transferred to a post in some distant place far away. Every day he had still come to see me after court, never once showing a slip. I was overjoyed to the point where I couldn't speak. I looked at him quietly for a long moment, then gently chided, "Something this significant and you hid it from me all this time." He startled briefly, thinking I was angry, and immediately reached out to take my hand and squeeze it. "You were resting during the pregnancy." I didn't want to mention it before it was done, in case you worried yourself unnecessarily. I understood his kindness perfectly. I raised my hands and bowed deeply to him. "I thank your highness." My mother, who had been listening and half following the conversation, finally seemed to catch on as I sat down, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. She took my hand and asked, hesitantly, "Ah Fu, are you about to be someone's mother?" I gave a small nod, my eyes glistening. In that very moment, the prince beside me gently interlaced my fingers with his, all 10 fingers woven together, not letting go. Xiao Xing turned to face my mother, clasped his hands and paid her a formal bow. His voice was low and earnest, carrying a weight of sincerity unlike any I had heard from him before. "Jing Xing humbly asks your permission to take Ah Fu as his principal wife. One life, one vow, I swear never to fail her." Not even for a single day, the whole table went silent. Even the wind outside the eaves seemed to pause, as though it, too, was listening to those words settle into the hearts of all present. I sat stunned. I had not expected that he would truly choose this moment, right here, in front of my mother, to propose with his own lips. My mother quickly raised her hands to cover her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. As long as Ah Fu is willing, what right does her mother have to refuse? Someone who loves my child from the bottom of their heart, this is 3 lifetimes of virtue for our family. He turned to look at me. In his eyes there was no power, no pride of royal blood, only a fragile, thin hope and an urgency he could not quite hide. "Ah Fu, I am waiting for you to say yes." My heart felt as though someone had taken it in their hand and gently squeezed. Every day he had coaxed me to eat, helped me out of bed, read alongside me, slept beside me. Every squeeze of the hand, every glance, all of them like snowflakes falling in silence, slowly, slowly forming a shelter. By the time I realized I had softened, spring had already come to the inside of my heart. My face went red. My voice was as small as it could possibly be. "All right. Ah Fu is fortunate to have met someone like you. I vow this life will not fail you." Xiao Xing gazed at me, the rims of his eyes faintly red. His voice was low and hoarse, carrying all the sincerity he had ever held. "Jing Xing also vows this life will not fail you." The birth of the heir. On the day the young heir was born, my mother sat in tearful vigil outside. She had been through 4 deliveries herself and knew too well that becoming a mother meant passing through the gates of death, so she could not hold back her worry. Xiao Xing stood at the door of the birthing room, his face cold as ice, not moving, not speaking. But Wu Feng could see clearly. The prince's hand was clenched on the armrest of the wheelchair so tightly that the wooden frame had cracked under the force of his grip. He hated that he could not rush in and take her pain for her. Wu Feng wanted to say something comforting but kept his mouth shut. He had never had a wife, and had no right to speak. Xiao Dao had already been reduced to someone barely present, alternating between weeping and murmuring Buddhist prayers. "No crying, no crying. Today is a happy day. The princess will safely deliver the young heir. May Guanyin Bodhisattva protect us, may the Buddha protect us." Wu Feng watched all of this and felt his temple throbbing. There was not a single normal person around him. At last, a newborn's cry rang out. sharp and full of life, like a bell struck in the depths of a mountain, scattering the clouds, settling the hearts of everyone present. Before Xiao Xing had even given an order, Wu Feng had already pushed the wheelchair, charging straight through the door. Inside, the scent of blood had not yet dissipated. The midwife stepped forward with quick, careful steps, both hands still stained red, her eyes radiant. "Congratulations, Your Highness. The princess and child are both well. The young heir weighs 5 jin, and his cry rings like the voice of a dragon, truly a noble bearing." Wu Feng watched with his own eyes as his master, a man who had single-handedly broken enemy camps and cut down 1,000 soldiers on the battlefield, stood with a pale face and trembling hands that could barely hold steady, still struggling to appear composed, and said, "Safe and sound is all that matters. Go, see to the young heir." The prince held a grand banquet across the capital, feasting at the greatest hall in the city for 7 days and nights. Guests flowed in and out like a river, and talk spread everywhere. They say when the beauties were being selected that year, she just knelt down once and the prince was instantly smitten. And wasn't there another breathtaking beauty who was also kept? Humph. Don't mention her. She couldn't keep her own reputation and disgraced the manor. She hanged herself long ago. Come to think of it, the princess suffered quite a bit, didn't she? But look at her now. One life, one partner. It was truly bitterness turning to sweetness. Back in the manor, after the banquet guests departed, the wet nurse had already carried the soundly sleeping little heir back to the nursery. Only the two of us remained in the room. The candle swayed, its light reflected on the walls, 2 shadows drawing closer together. The prince's eyes burned bright, his slender fingers gradually undoing the sash of his robe. "Ah Fu, have you fallen asleep already?" I immediately squeezed my eyes shut and played dead. But his familiar breath drew closer moment by moment. My lashes fluttered involuntarily. He had done this on purpose, sending the wet nurse away early, and not forgetting to bolt the door from the inside. All of it for one reason. When his hot breath brushed across the shell of my ear, my fist clenched instinctively, my nails pressing deep into my palm, only afraid that if I let out a single sound, he would seize on it as evidence. Though his legs were still recovering, when it came to matters of the inner chamber, he had never once been at a disadvantage. All through the months of pregnancy I had been spared, and now those nights were coming due, but Xiao Xing was immensely patient. His slender fingers drifted lightly over my closed eyes, touched the end of my brow, careful as someone touching a dream. That faint roughness from calluses slid across my skin, making my whole body go numb, as though silk threads were being drawn across it. I bit my lip, held my breath, and tried with everything I had not to make a sound. I could hold on. But he laughed. He leaned close, wrapped one arm around my back, pulled me tight, and laughed low and soft against my ear. "Since you've already fallen asleep, your husband won't stand on ceremony." The moment he finished, my earlobe was caught between his teeth in the gentlest of bites. My entire body shivered. I couldn't suppress the small sound that escaped me. "You're high." The voice on the other side of my ear was a low, soft laugh, like something submerged in warm water. Wrong form of address. "Ah Fu, call me Jing Xing." I hesitated for a moment. Then a light flicker at my earlobe, and my scalp went numb. My voice came out unsteady. Jing, Jing Xing, Jing Xing. Even his courtesy name would do, if he insisted. Ordinarily, when angry, I had always silently called him Jing Xing inside my own heart. Now might as well indulge him once. The canopy fell low. The red candles seemed to weep, tiny drops of wax falling tick-tick-tick into the silent spring night. Shao Xing gently raised my hand, and placed a soft kiss on each fingertip. His voice came out slightly muffled, as though everything he had ever felt was being pressed into a single breath. On our wedding night, you were with child. There was no wedding night for us. I owe you this, let me make it up to you now. My cheeks went pink. My heart hammered as though it might shatter. Just one tender sentence, that was all it took. I didn't wait for him to say more. I reached out and bit softly at his finger, my voice dropped so low it was nearly only for myself. As you wish, spring night, still as water. In the wavering light of a red candle, two shadows wrapped close around each other, forehead against forehead, body against body. No more of the old barriers that had once frightened the heart. No more doubt. No more hurt. Only a single line, carved deep into the heart. If you are given only one love in this lifetime, love with everything you have. Love without regret. Love without holding back. Love without turning away, the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.